Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sports Zone. I'm so excited for this episode because we're bringing the show back to the home front. We're going to talk about our very own Dallas Cowboys with an expert, Kyle Youmans, our very own UNT alum and on-air host of Talking Cowboys on DallasCowboys.com. How are you doing, Kyle?
Doing good. Of course, just ready to get back to normal, get back to training camp, and finally see some football is kind of the biggest thing on the minds of everybody around the Star these days. So doing all right and just taking it day by day.
Well, I bet. Well, we're going to be talking about a lot about the Cowboys. Like, they've been at the forefront of the battle which is going on with the NFL. The draft was insane. Dak's contract, Andy Dalton going to the Cowboys. Like, there's a lot going on. So let's first dive into Dak's contract. They were gonna franchise tag him, which I must say I'm on board with it because I'm not a Dak Prescott fan. I'm not a Dallas Cowboys fan, which means I can be unbiased when it comes to the Cowboys. But I thought I just was on board with franchise tagging him. And then he turns around, throws a fit, throws a party, and then they offer him the largest contract in NFL history. How do you take that?
So first off, I mean, the best way to describe Dak's situation is it's gone pretty much according to what it should have done. Because of the thing with Dak Prescott, when you say you were on board with the franchise tag was going to happen because of the way that kind of the contract was working out. Is either they were going to find a deadline before or find a deal before that deadline. They pushed for that, weren't able to get on the same page. And then the franchise tag was the safety blanket to keep your seat at the table and gives you till July 15th to potentially work out a long-term deal. After that, he's playing for $31.4 million. So the franchise tag was going to happen pretty much regardless. Now, when it comes to the long-term deal and like you talked about the fallout following being tagged, the party, I don't put a whole lot into that. I think there was, it came out later on, there was only about 8 to 10 people there. It wasn't necessarily a gigantic shindig that was originally reported by TMZ. I think it ended up being more of kind of a get-together of friends yes, it included guys like Ezekiel Elliott in there as well, but ultimately, it wasn't. I don't think that was a retaliation. I think now with Dak Prescott, the best thing for Dak Prescott is to wait because he's a top 10 quarterback. Whether or not you talk about maybe some of those other guys that could be in the hunt with like a Carson Wentz, Deshaun Watson, he's a top 10 quarterback because of what he brings value wise of only being in his mid 20s, of being a 4-year starter now in the NFL, and the leadership that he brings to the table. So I think he's going to wait until as close as he can to that July 15th deadline because there's only good things that can happen. Either he gets more money and the front office gives in to Dak Prescott, or somebody else goes out and gets a long-term deal. Patrick Mahomes is waiting on what could be a $200 million NFL deal, which would shatter records and reset the quarterback market. Same thing for Deshaun Watson. He's going to have money close to, if not more so, than what Dak Prescott's going to get. So the only thing that Dak Prescott can do right now is wait, see if one of those other deals gets signed, and then all of a sudden you're trying to press toward that July 15th deadline. You're going to start hearing more and more of those talks kind of ramping up right around that time.
All right, and I want to talk about, you said you're talking about Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson's deals that are going to be coming up in the future. Well, they're saying that one of the biggest reasons that his contract is holding out is the length of the contract. The Cowboys want to keep him for 5 years. He wants to let go at 4. That way he can sign a new contract, like you said, whenever the quarterback line gets drawn, right? So are you on Dak Prescott's side of kind of having a shorter contract so he gets more money, or are you on the Cowboy side that you want to keep him for longer so that he doesn't back out or gets more money elsewhere?
That's a great question because a couple months ago, it was a completely different answer because of the ever-changing world of COVID-19 and what we're having to deal with as a society. Going into this offseason, you were looking at the salary cap and the CBA that was signed right at the beginning of when all of this COVID-19 really started to come to the forefront. It looked like the salary cap was going to continue to expand over the next couple of years. That's not necessarily the case anymore. That salary cap could actually shrink. So Dak Prescott, early in the offseason, when they were having these conversations, wanted 4 years because then, like you said, when the quarterback market resets and that money continues to get higher, the salary cap gets higher, there's more money for Dak Prescott to make 4 years from now rather than signing for 5 years and having to wait for that deal to come up. But now, with the salary cap kind of being in question, it may not expand as much as we thought so originally because of some of the money that the NFL could lose throughout this fall. At this moment, Dak Prescott's still going to push for that 4 years because the NFL hasn't lost anything yet. They've been able to have the combine. They've been able to have the Senior Bowl and the draft and free agency, and now they're going into training camp. But if we start seeing games with reduced fans or no fans at all, then that revenue money is going to start drying up and the salary cap will potentially shrink in the next couple of years. So right now, I get it. Dak Prescott's going to push for 4 years so he can reset that money later on. If he's going to push for 5, the NFL is going to have to maybe come up and say, hey, we're not going to have fans this year, or we're going to have only 50% of fans, set a regulation there for Dak Prescott to potentially reach a deal.
All right. So I think you brought up a really, really good topic, which is fans. So how do you think that the NFL is going to be impacted if they can't have fans at all, or if it's 50%? Because in my opinion, yeah, you can sell seats to only 50% of people, but there's no way to regulate whenever people go to the bathroom or go to concessions and do all that. So how do you think that football is going to be impacted this season worldwide or widespread with COVID going on?
That's so tough to tell. And even right now, I mean, we see how things have changed over the last couple of weeks. Let's take high school football, for example. They started workouts June 8th. We're right in the middle of June at the moment, so we're about a week removed from that. And then all of a sudden, these workouts are either coming to a halt or being suspended because of players testing positive. There's been Cowboys and Texans players that have tested positive. So there's really no way to tell how this is really going to impact NFL franchises specifically and how they're going to kind of deal with that along the way. I think there will be fans, maybe not at the beginning of the season, but at some point throughout the course of the season. Maybe as you get deeper into the winter, the threat potentially goes down, the curve is lowered, people do their job by wearing masks and staying socially distant throughout the course of the season. It may help out to get fans and even more fans later on. But even with right now, that's so tough to tell. There are much higher, people with much higher pay grades that make those decisions than where I'm at, just talking about the Cowboys. But I think whenever you look forward, you're going to have some discipline there as a fan base, not just individuals, but everyone. It's going to have to be herd mindset of being able to go to these games and find a way to get to the seats and cheer on your Cowboys. So it's going to be really interesting. And I can't really give you any of those answers right now because I don't think anyone has those answers. It's going to really have to tell over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and honestly, it's hard because especially in Texas, numbers are going back up. But with what we do, we're starting to get back into the office. I know I have to get tested to get back into the office. Everyone has to get tested. So the more tests that go on, the more that cases are going to come up. Athletes are moving back into the dorms and they have to get tested. They have to get their temperature checked every single time they go into a weight room, which I think is great. But you mentioned that Cowboys and Texans players are testing positive. Were you talking about Ezekiel Elliott? And now that we're moving into training camp, do you think that will affect the team having such a key testing positive and he's not going to be able to train with the team?
I don't think it's going to affect really a whole lot because training camp's still about a month away, more like 6 weeks away. And of course, COVID-19 throughout the studies that have been done, it only affects you for a couple of weeks. Now, he may take a little bit of time to get back his strength, and depending on how bad the symptoms are and how bad he's affected by it, I don't think he's going to be really that impacted. Now, I could be wrong. Prayers up to him and everybody around him because I want to make sure that first and foremost, the person specifically is taken care of at the highest regards. But I think whenever it comes to the team, I don't think it's going to have really that big of an impact as much as you think because players, coaches, front office haven't been in the facility yet. They haven't been around each other yet. I mean, I received text messages from friends of mine saying, hey, are you okay? I know that Cowboys players have been tested positive. Are you okay? I'm fine. I haven't been in the facility because we're still in that early tier stage of getting back into the star of Frisco and finding our ways back to normalcy. So I think you're going to see some of those COVID-19 cases pop up. I think that's going to be a case of where we are opening up as a society. There are going to be some positive cases. You just can't make sure that it turns into an outbreak. One positive case can't turn into a spread. If you are able to keep it controlled and keep it together, all of a sudden things get much easier.
All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton signed a 1-year deal with the Cowboys to become a backup. What do you think about it?
I love it. I love the signing of Andy Dalton, because going into the draft, let's start with the draft first off. Your backup quarterback was Cooper Rush. Then you had Clayton Thorson, a second-year guy out of Northwestern. You had kind of a thin quarterback room. You go to the draft, you pick up Ben DiNucci, who I think is a very underrated 7th-round pick, and then you sign Andy Dalton. There's no longer a need for Cooper Rush. He's dropped to waivers, picked up by the Giants. Now he's with Jason Garrett in New York. I love the fact that you bring in an experienced backup, a backup who's been a winning quarterback in the NFL, somebody who's made a run to the postseason, and also somebody who's from Texas, somebody who's back pretty much in his hometown, in his backyard, and a chance to kind of restart as a veteran quarterback who's going to ultimately try and go for a starting job in the future. But I think it's a good thing to mentor Dak from somebody who's been in the league longer, maybe not had as much individual success, but has still had team success in the past and has learned from some of the greats. I think Dak Prescott's going to benefit from it. I think the Cowboys benefit, because if Dak Prescott ends up holding out, I don't think that'll happen, but it may end up happening. You never know how things kind of turn around with negotiations and whatnot. But if he ends up getting hurt, then all of a sudden you have a quarterback that's an insurance policy for your roster that you think you've built to be a contender for a Super Bowl this year, without having to worry about your starting quarterback going down. I think it's a magnificent, low-risk, high-reward type of deal for Andy Dalton, and I think it's the same thing for the Cowboys. It's a perfect marriage.
No, I'm so glad you said that, because I am right there with you. So many people that I've talked about were like, what's the point? It's a waste. It's like, they're like, he didn't know where to go. He's just looking for somewhere to call home for a second. And I was like, he's from here. Like, he's from the North Texas area. He played at TCU. He's signing a 1-year to come in as a backup. And you exactly hit it on the head that he's there for Dak Prescott, because he's been in pressure situations that Dak hasn't been. He can drive him to be more experienced up here and, drive him to a playoff position, because, in the first 5 years of him being with the Bengals, he went to the playoffs. So he has it there. And, he's quoted to say, it was a great place. I love the area. He lives here, and he's like, it's a great place to kickstart. He said the second half of his career. So like you said, he's going to kind of take a year just to sit with the Cowboys. He's fine with being a backup, and then he wants to kickstart the rest of his year. I've never been like crazy about Andy Dalton, because I didn't see really the point of being crazy about Andy Dalton. I know he was a pretty big joke for a little bit, but the man has the hardware. It's there. And moving on, let's dive into the draft, which was pretty stacked. They didn't have a terrible draft. What do you think of CeeDee Lamb?
Okay, first off, you said didn't have a terrible draft. Come on now, Mercedes. Come on, get with it. It's an incredible draft. And here's why. You got your third wide receiver. Let's just put quotations around that, because by the end of the year, he may be your top wide receiver. That's how much I love CeeDee Lamb. He was the top receiver on my board. He was number 6 on my board and the Cowboys board. And the fact that he fell all the way down to 17 was miraculous. And it worked out for the Cowboys. They had set their roster up prior to the draft so efficiently to where they could take best player available. They weren't pigeonholed into taking a corner or a safety or a defensive tackle. They could go with whoever the best player was. And not only did they do that with CeeDee Lamb, but they did it throughout the course of the draft. You had CeeDee Lamb first, Trayvon Diggs in the second round, and Bill Gallimore in the third. You won the draft in day 1 and 2. That was how quickly they took care of business whenever it came to the draft. And I think whenever you talk about CeeDee Lamb, his ability to play in the slot, to be able to go up on the outside against some of the better corners in college football last year and take them to town. I mean, he went up against first-round draft pick Jeff Gladney out of TCU on multiple occasions and absolutely schooled him. And the fact that he fell to 17 is something that I will never really completely get, but I think it's something that the Cowboys are ecstatic about. He's going to bring an extra element to that offense for not only Dak Prescott, but I think for Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper as well. It takes the pressure off of each one of those guys who were 1,000-yard receivers last year. You could add another element to that. He may not be immediately an impact, but I think he will be. And I think there's a ton of excitement around him and what he's going to be able to add to that offense overall.
No, watching it, I don't disagree with you. I really like CeeDee Lamb. I think just the pick itself, going into it, I was like, okay, the Cowboys need defense. And that's what all Cowboys fans were saying. That's what everybody was saying. We need defense. But that's interesting that you said that they set it up in the way that they're getting the best player available. Because when they were kind of foreshadowing it, I was like, they're going to get CeeDee Lamb. And then I was like, oh, but look at Philly right behind you. And I was saying that they grabbed CeeDee Lamb so that Philly wouldn't grab CeeDee Lamb, which isn't a bad thing. You know, you want that weapon so your enemy doesn't have it and can't take you down. But, I mean, I think it's going to be great. And I think right after they drafted him, my exact words were, no excuses, Dak. There's no excuses. There should have been no excuses last season. Like, they're stacked on offense, and you know the filling in the gaps on defense, I think, will help getting the new cornerbacks and stuff. But so what do you think the team is looking at, offensive, defensively? What are you looking at going into the season?
Well, I think there's a couple of those spots. First off, out of spots that are exciting, I think wide receiver is one of those. I think on the defensive line, kind of going back to what you were talking about of should they have gone defense, the defensive player they would have selected at 17 was K'Lavon Chaisson, the edge rusher out of LSU, a boomer bust type of player. I was very high on Chaisson. If Chaisson would have been a pick at 17, I would have been a happy camper. But you then go out and you get Aldon Smith. Randy Gregory should be reinstated, or hopefully will be reinstated by the NFL. You pick Bradley Anae, who was a third-round talent in the 5th round. I think you're fine at defensive end. You got Tank Lawrence on the other side, defensive end, edge rusher. You have a lot more depth and freedom to play around with that position than you did prior to the draft and even after the draft, just because of what you were able to select there. So K'Lavon Chaisson going to the Cowboys and being a defensive lineman at 17 may not have fit as much as a CeeDee Lamb would have. Now, in terms of the question mark spots, I would say the offensive line, the very interior. Travis Frederick retires at center. You've got a rash of guys at center and left guard that are going to be fighting for the spots. Because if you look at the offensive line, left tackle, Tyron Smith, he's not going anywhere. Right guard, Zach Martin. And then you got right tackle, Lyle Collins. They're set in stone. Those 3 out of the 5 are good to go. But center, it's either going to be one of 4 guys, Tyler Biadasz, Connor Williams, Connor McGovern, or Joe Looney, who filled in for Travis Frederick in 2018. The loser out of that group for the center spot is going to slide on over to left guard and take over that left guard spot. So I think that's one of the biggest question marks. By far, that's maybe the most intriguing battle for me heading into training camp is who's going to be the front runner for that center position and vice versa with the left guard spot. I think Connor Williams still has an edge at left guard. I think Joe Looney has a guard or an edge at center. But it'll be interesting to see how Tyler Biadasz and Connor McGovern, 2 high draft pick and highly regarded guys, will come in and play that position. On the defensive side of the football, I'd say cornerback. There's so many corners now that you can kind of throw into the mix that you didn't necessarily have beforehand because you lose Byron Jones, but you pick up a Darryl Worley, and then you draft Reggie Robinson the second. You draft a Trayvon Diggs, and all of a sudden those 2 guys could potentially start. You've got 6 corners that are going to be fighting for 3 positions. And I think that's something that the Cowboys haven't necessarily had in a good amount of time. And I think Mike Nolan relishes the fact of being able to have longer, bigger cornerbacks to be able to go and throw out on the edge against some of those bigger wide receivers. You still have Cheeto Awuzie, Jordan Lewis, who could play the slot corner spot, could come up and be in the box. And I think that corner spot probably is one of the more intriguing spots on that entire defense, even though there's a lot of moving pieces there.
All right, let's talk about coaching staff. huge change. I don't know if you know this about me. I am a Green Bay fan.
Oh,
I love Green Bay.
I'm sorry.
I know it's so terrible because I live in Texas. I talk about the Cowboys all the time. I am a Green Bay fan, and I loved Mike McCarthy. I really did. I loved him at Green Bay. I'm so sad that he left because of Aaron Rodgers. So how do you think his fit is going to be with the Dallas Cowboys? Because personally, if you look at the team that he built with Green Bay and the way that they ran and stuff like that, and then switching him over to Dallas, he's going to have a new outlook, or it's going to take a while for them to play the way that he wants them to play. So how do you think the fit's going to be at Dallas for Mike McCarthy?
Well, I think you can take the tears of Mike McCarthy leaving Green Bay and wipe it up with the Super Bowl banner that the Cowboys will win at some point with Mike McCarthy as the head coach. Just so you know, I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm just messing with you. But I think the fit will actually end up working out pretty quickly. And the thing is Kellen Moore is one of the two guys, him and Grant Nussmeier are the two guys that are going to be back with the Cowboys from the coaching staff a year ago. If I were bringing in a head coach, and I were talking especially about a Super Bowl winning head coach who has shown that he can develop a young quarterback into something special, aka Aaron Rodgers, and get to the mountaintop. I didn't want him necessarily to come in and blow up what the Cowboys had last year, which was the top-rated offense in the NFL. I think he's going to come in. He's going to put the training wheels back on Kellen Moore, say, hey, Kellen, listen, you're doing a great job, but let's input some things here, there, and allow the quarterback guru to work his magic on Dak Prescott and to potentially even develop some younger guys like a Ben DiNucci off of a practice squad or as a third quarterback. So I think he's going to bring an added element to the offense. And then you talk about the staff that he was able to bring together. I mean, Mike Nolan on the defensive end, as the defensive coordinator, he's a guy who's had success. He was a head coach at San Francisco, defensive coordinator with the Falcons, has been with the Saints, has been with great coaching staffs, and all of a sudden has a chance to come in and fix the defense that struggles so much in 2019. This is something that I'm really excited to see because I think he's a genius when it comes to the way that he works with hybrid looks and 3-4s and 4-3s, and he's going to have to switch it up and show kind of a multiple defense to keep these spread offenses off guard. I am so pumped for that because in the past, Rod Marinelli didn't ever do that. And I love Rod Marinelli, but I think this is something that's different for Cowboys fans, and they're going to like it much better. Same thing with even some of the positional coaches. Skip Peete, the running back coach, Coach Todd Gurley, DeMarco Murray has been around some of the best running backs in the game. He gets to come in and work with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. You turn around on the other side, you got Jim Tom Sula, Joe Philbin, just all these, John Fossil from special teams. Special teams was awful for the Cowboys last year. That's no secret. You think you bring in John Fossil, who was one of the highest regarded special teams coaches in all of the NFL, and then he's going to find a way to work with maybe a Tony Pollard or even a CeeDee Lamb to return some kicks, find a way to make some seams, and all of a sudden special teams is a strength. I think Cowboys fans are going to be very intrigued by this coaching staff, how different it is from the old coaching staff, and how much it's actually going to make an impact early.
All right, so the whole entire time we've talked about they have all of these weapons. There's no excuses. So I want to hear right now, what do you foresee going into the season? Do you see the playoffs? Do you see Super Bowl contender? Do you see not making the playoffs? What are you looking at?
I don't have a specific prediction at the moment because we still have a lot to decide because of training camp and everything moving forward. But let's just talk about expectations. The expectations are sky high. You bring in a Super Bowl winning coach. You have a quarterback who's about to be paid maybe as the highest paid player in NFL history, who all of a sudden has three of the best wide receivers in the NFL: Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb. Like you said, no excuses is kind of the mindset with the Cowboys moving forward. I think it's going to be a little bit slower, even though I just raved about the coaching staff and I just talked about how the impact and how the transition is going to be smooth. You got to think about the situation we're in. They haven't even met their players in person yet because of COVID-19. Everything's been virtual. Everything has been based on this offseason being away from each other. I want to wait until we get into person before I start making predictions and things, but the expectations, regardless of who has been together and what the virtual meetings have been like, are still going to be sky high. They're not expecting just a playoff berth. fans, front office, coaches, they're looking for a Super Bowl. They're looking for a championship game. It's got to be a big time jump from what the Jason Garrett era was. It's got to be that much higher and that much more elevated for Mike McCarthy and his entire staff to really feel like they've done a good job.
No, I mean, I agree. The expectations are high. And for a non-Cowboys fan, I'm excited because I'm just a football fan. And, you know, to see that, I was excited at the beginning of last season because it was all kind of coming together. They had Randall Cobb, who is forever one of my favorite players, and, you know, very good, right? So they released him, but at the same time, they have all these weapons. There's really no excuses. I'm super excited to see the Cowboys. Thank you so much, Kyle, for being on this show with us. And I mean, I hope our expectations play out well for the Cowboys, and I hope you get to get into the office soon. I know you miss your job.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do miss it. I miss all the people around and being able to interact with everybody throughout the day. But hey, Cowboys fans are great, whether they're right next to you or they're virtual. And I'm always happy to come back and support the Mean Green, North Texas alum for life. So anytime, you guys.
All right. Well, thanks, Kyle. Y'all can listen and watch Kyle on DallasCowboys.com, and he's on the show Talking Cowboys as an on-air host. I'm Mercedes Zaragoza. We'll see y'all next time.